They laughed as they threw her rifle case into the dumpster, not knowing that 3 years ago, she had put a bullet through a window at 900 meters to save the life of the man now standing behind them. The parking lot of the gun range was dusty and wide, stretching out under a pale autumn sky that promised nothing but silence. Elena Mwangi stood motionless beside her truck, her hands still gripping the strap of her empty duffel bag, watching two men in tactical vests toss her equipment into the trash like it was garbage. They couldn't be bothered to sort. One of them, a stocky guy with a buzz cut and a fading Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, turned back to her with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe try a yoga class instead," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "This ain't the place for you, sweetheart. Go back to Africa." The other one laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the metal siding of the range building. Elena didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there, the wind pulling at the edges of her jacket, her jaw tight, her breathing steady. And in that moment, she made a choice not to fight, not to argue, but to walk away, because some battles she'd learned long ago aren't won with words. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Elena had been coming to this range for 2 months now. It was the only place within 50 miles that had lanes long enough for precision rifle training. And she needed the practice, not because she was rusty, no. Her hands still remembered the weight of a rifle like it was part of her skeleton, but because staying sharp was the only way she knew how to stay sane. The war had ended for her 3 years ago, but the quiet that followed was louder than any firefight. So she drove out here twice a week, set up her targets at 600 meters, and let the recoil remind her that she was still alive. But today had been different. Today, she'd arrived to find the two men blocking the entrance to the long-range section, arms crossed, eyes hard, private members only. The one with the buzzcut had said, even though the sign on the door said no such thing, when she'd tried to explain that she'd paid for a full day pass. He'd stepped forward, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "I don't care what you paid for," he said. "We don't need your kind here." And then they'd taken her gear. She walked to her truck in silence, climbed into the driver's seat, and sat there for a long time, with her hands on the wheel. The leather was warm under her palms. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of rust and gold. She thought about leaving. She thought about calling the manager. She thought about all the things she could say, all the ways she could prove them wrong. But then she heard the gravel crunch behind her, and she looked up into the rearview mirror. A man was walking across the parking lot, tall, late 40s, with the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of carrying weight, both literal and otherwise. He wore a faded army jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, and he moved with the deliberate calm of someone who'd learned long ago that rushing only got you killed. He stopped beside the dumpster, glanced inside, and then turned toward the two men who were still standing near the entrance, laughing about something. Elena watched as he said something to them. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the way their smiles faltered, the way the buzzcut guy straightened up, his hands dropping to his sides, the way the other one took a step back, eyes wide, like he'd just seen a ghost. And then the man in the army jacket turned and looked directly at her truck. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elena felt her heart kick hard against her ribs. She knew that face. She knew those eyes. She'd seen them through a scope once, 3 years ago, in a city that no longer had a name. On a day when the heat was so thick you could taste it, and the enemy had them pinned in a building, with no way out. She'd been on a rooftop for blocks, away, her rifle pressed against her shoulder, her breathing slow and controlled, waiting for the shot. And when the insurgent had stepped into the window, rifle raised, finger on the trigger, aimed directly at the man who was now walking toward her, she'd pulled the trigger first. One shot, clean, final. The man had dropped, and the ambush had collapsed, and the soldiers in that building had lived to see another day, including him, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hayes. He reached her truck and tapped on the window. Elena rolled it down, her mouth dry, her hands still gripping the wheel. "Sergeant Mwangi," he said quietly, and the sound of her rank, spoken with respect and recognition, nearly broke her. "Sir," she managed, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. He smiled, just a little, the kind of smile that carried the weight of shared history. "I thought that was you. Saw your name on the range sign-in sheet." He glanced back toward the dumpster. "Those idiots give you trouble." She didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. He could read it in her face, in the way her shoulders were set, in the way her hands were still holding on like she was afraid to let go. "They don't know," he said, shaking his head. "They don't know who you are, what you did." He paused, and his voice dropped lower, quieter, like he was sharing a secret meant only for her. "But I do, and I'm not letting this stand. What happened next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was absolute. Marcus Hayes walked back to the entrance, and this time Elena followed. The two men were still standing there, their laughter dying the moment they saw the look on his face. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "I need you to listen very carefully." He gestured toward Elena. "This woman is Sergeant Elena Mwangi, formerly of the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. She's a certified sniper, with over 40 confirmed kills and a Silver Star for valor. 3 years ago, in Mosul, she saved my life and the lives of 9 other soldiers when we were pinned down by enemy fire. She made a shot at 900 meters in a sandstorm that most trained marksmen wouldn't even attempt." He let that sink in for a moment, watching their faces go pale. "And you just threw her gear in the trash." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. The buzzcut guy opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. We didn't know." "No," Marcus cut him off. "You didn't, because you didn't ask. You didn't care. You saw someone you decided didn't belong, and you acted like cowards." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something colder, sharper. "Now you're going to get her equipment out of that dumpster. You're going to apologize, and then you're going to leave this range and not come back. Because if I ever hear that you've disrespected another veteran, any veteran, I'll make sure every range, every club, every organization within 100 miles knows exactly who you are." They moved fast. The gear was retrieved, dusted off, handed back to Elena with mumbled apologies that barely qualified as words. And then they left, taillights disappearing down the gravel road like shadows fleeing the light. Marcus turned to Elena, his expression softening. "You okay?" She nodded, her throat tight. "Yeah, thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," he said. "You earned every bit of respect you're owed. I'm just making sure people remember that." He paused, then added, "Range is yours for the rest of the day, on the house." Elena spent the next 2 hours on the long-range course, her rifle balanced, her breathing even, her shots landing exactly where she intended. And when she finally packed up and drove home, the sky was dark and the stars were out. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel so heavy. Because respect isn't given by those too small to see beyond themselves. It's claimed by those who've earned it in the fire and the dust and the moments when everything is on the line. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who matter most are the ones who remember. If this story moved you, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you believe that courage and respect should never be forgotten, hit that subscribe button, because there are so many more stories like this that deserve to be told.